Hey everybody, this is Dave Valier, Cryptopolis on Twitter, and I have Jerry with me, Jerry Hall, and hey Jerry, and welcome everybody to another episode of Beyond Moon, where we explore what happens when you have a lot of money. Okay, Jerry, let's talk about three things today, three major factors that we're going to be talking about as far as goals go, because you know what? Sudden wealth can happen to anybody, I think. And especially if you're in crypto. You never know what's going to happen in crypto. And you can be a pauper one day and you could be a multimillionaire the next day. And it's happened before. There's a guy I follow on Twitter. His name's his Twitter handle is coining203. And that's exactly what happened to him. Bought a ton of XRP before the 2017 run up and cashed out just a little over $1 million. So it can happen. It's happened before, and it's happened to people we know. We're hopefully we'll do the next bull run as well as he did.
Yeah.
But there's three major factors here that we need to keep in mind, and that is what you have, what you want, and the time frame and the price of the asset when you do decide to cash out. So we're going to go over two examples here of using this process. And Jerry, why don't you go ahead and give it a start?
All right, excellent. Let me share my screen with everybody here. What we have here is example number one. So for instance, you're a person, you know what you have. You have 10,000 XRP, and you have an ambitious goal of, after taxes, getting $1 million. That's an excellent goal. So what we do is we're going to take a look at the 10,000 XRP. For instance, in this example, we're saying you have a blended or average cost basis of 50 cents per XRP. Okay. So in other words, you spent $5,000 of your own money to buy that 10,000 XRP. Now, this long-term capital gain is based on the fact that you've held it over a year, and the 22.5% is kind of a blended rate, looking at the 15% federal rate, and depending upon what state you're in, they could be different, but for the purposes of this example, we're going to use a 22.5% blended rate. Obviously, talk to your tax person prior to you actually crunching the real numbers when it really happens. Okay, now what I want $1 million after taxes. So I came up with, I need an XRP price of $145 per XRP, which would give me $1,450,000. I'm going to have my time frame is open-ended because I know what I have and I know what I want. So the variable in between is the time frame that it's going to happen. The market is going to dictate that time frame. It could take months. It could take years. It could take decades. Well, however long it takes for it to reach $145 for me to execute my plan, that's what I'm going to do. So the equation looks like this. I take my 10,000 XRP at 145. I've got $1,450,000. I'm going to minus the $5,000, which is my cost basis, giving me a taxable $1,445,000. Now my long-term cap gain deduction of 22.5% is $325,125. I'm going to give that to the IRS and to the state and be happy. It's going to leave me a net total of $1,119,875. That is how I can construct a goal on paper. So all I need to do is remember that the market's going to dictate when this plan can actually be executed. Let me turn it over to you for example number two, Dave.
Sure. So here's another example, and this time we're going to include a compounding interest calculator. So there's a more detailed approach requires a bit of knowledge and management, but there's some principles about compounding interest and dollar cost averaging that are really easy to learn. And it's used by almost everybody in order to grow their wealth. In fact, the most famous example of that is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett has told us that he does not invest in a company that does not pay him. And so what he means by that typically is that they will either have a dividend that the company pays on a regular basis. And in fact, in 2019, Warren Buffett was paid, his company, Berkshire Hathaway, was paid $35 billion in dividends. And so he's got he has a system and a formula, and basically it comes down to a very, very simple thing, is that he does not invest in a company unless they pay him to own that shares, own those shares. That also helps reduce volatility. Yeah. And again, he has a very long time horizon, like we all should, right? So in your example, if you have 10,000 XRP and you want $1 million, you're going to have to wait a little bit. However, let's say that instead of $145 for your XRP, you start to cash out at $50 XRP. If you cashed out at $50, you'd have $500,000 at a cost basis, 50 cents each. $5,000, your initial investment would net you $495,000. Your capital gains on that blended, once again, is 22.5%. And the taxes then are at $111,375. The net is $383,625. Now, for the majority of people, that's still a very sizable amount of money. Even though you haven't netted $1 million, it's a good sum of money. And it's something that you can actually work with then to attain your goals. So for the average person, we're just going to assume you have some debt. We're going to apply $133,625 of that $383 that you netted towards paying off your debt. So you now are debt-free and you have some cash to work with. If we take the $250,000 that's left, which is net after taxes and after paying off your debt and other bills, without any additional money added to it over a period of 30 years at an interest rate of just 5%. 5% is very, very achievable, especially if you're involved in dividend-paying stocks. My personal target rate is anywhere between 4 and 7%. 5% is very, very doable. That compounding of the dividend rate typically happens in a stock 4 times a year. You take the 4 times a year, you compound that interest. So in other words, the interest that you earn on the first quarter is reapplied to purchase more shares in the company. So the very next quarter, you're not earning a dividend just on the initial shares that you bought, but also on the additional shares that you purchased with the first interest payment, first dividend payment. And if you calculate that over a 30-year period, the future value of that $250,000 one-time investment, don't add to it again, you don't have to put another penny in, is $1,110,053.31. So you have achieved your goal of $1 million. Jerry?
Wow, that's impressive, especially for a younger person.
Yes, absolutely.
Who has that incredible asset that you and I would like to have a lot more of, and it's called time.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So, hey, I've queued up a video here. Now, this is a video created by a guy who put together the top 5 tips that he got from a Tony Robbins book called Money Master the Game. But this particular illustration, I think, goes a long way to speak to, looking at compounding interest from several different perspectives. So let's take a minute, check this out. I hope everybody enjoys it. I'm going to be quiet for the video.
A great example from the book. Imagine that 2 friends, Joe and Bob, decide to invest $300 a month. Joe gets started at age 19, keeps going for 8 years, and then stops adding to this pot at age 27. In all, he saved a total of $28,800. Joe's money then compounds at a rate of 10% a year, which is roughly the rate of return of the U.S. stock market over the last century. By the time he retires at age 65, How much does he have? The answer is $1,863,287. His small $28,800 investment has grown to nearly a $2 million investment. So let's look at his friend Bob. Bob gets off to a slower start and begins investing the same exact amount, $300 a month, at the age of 27. He's a disciplined guy and keeps on investing $300 a month until he's 65, a period of 39 years. His money also compounds at 10% a year. The result? When he retires at age 65, he's sitting on a nest egg of $1,589,733. So, if we step back for a moment, we can see that Bob invested a total of $140,000, which is almost 5 times more than the $28,800 that Joe invested.
Right.
Yet Joe has ended up with an extra $273,554, even though Joe never invested a dime after the age of 27. So because Joe started earlier, the compound interest he earns on his investment brings way more value to his account. The point of the story is that compound interest is a force that can catapult you into a life of total financial freedom. Tip.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? Time is
I
your friend.
like it. Yeah.
And actually, on the Coil page, we're going to insert a link to a trusted compound interest calculator so you can do these calculations for yourself. It's easy to use, and you can run through different scenarios to get a good idea of how compounding interest works. There is a famous quote by Albert Einstein, of all people, arguably one of the smartest individuals in the world that has ever lived. And he stated that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. And what he meant by that is that if you understand compound interest, you're the one who wants to receive that interest. You want to receive those dividends. You want to be able to compound your money. And if you don't understand it, then you're taking out loans and paying it to somebody else, right? You're in debt and you're paying it to somebody else. So it's a very, very powerful force for generating wealth. And it's how, if you go back to the early 1920s and 30s, and you think about the Vanderbilts and the Rothschilds, even for the 1800s, you're talking about all of the really wealthy family that are still have a name today.
Yeah.
They generated their wealth based on how they invested it using compound interest.
Excellent. Quick side note, History Channel put out a series called The Men Who Built America. Goes into great detail about the Vanderbilts, the JP Morgans. So as an aside, something cool to go check out.
It's a fantastic series. And not only that, but it showed you how they made money, but they don't show you how they invested it. But how they invested it was just as important as how they made it, because if you don't invest it wisely, if you don't understand what you're doing, it's very easy to just blow through the money very, very quickly. So you got to know what to do with it as well as make it.
Well, there are a ton of lottery winners, former athletes, and inheritance recipients that can tell us those sad stories. It is all about how you invested. That leads me to think about one of the topics we talked about in our last video, and I just want to reiterate again, the importance of giving yourself an adjustment period. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is to adjust emotionally, right? To adjust emotionally to this wave of money or profit that's going to come your way through your investment. Experts say 3, 6, 9, 12 months. You be the judge for yourself, but give yourself an adjustment period before you actually start spending it, investing it, or doing anything crazy. Give yourself some time to adjust to this. Well,
that's actually true. If you've never had wealth before and all of a sudden you do, I mean, all of a sudden could happen over a period of years, but you sacrificed in order to make the investments that you have. And then suddenly within, I mean, you could have invested 3, 4, 5 years in crypto. And then all of a sudden, over a period of just months, all of your gains, all of your profits are made. So that is a relatively short time period in which to have those kind of gains. It's emotional. You get very emotional about those things because you think about all the sacrifices that you've made over the last 2, 3 years, or however long you're invested. And now it comes very quickly. Your mind begins to think about all of the things that you gave up that you'd like to have now. And so it is a very good piece of advice. And we're not financial advisors here, guys. You have to kind of make your own decisions. But that's why it's so important to have a team around you so that you can make rational decisions. But most investment advisors would probably counsel you to say, look, just sit on it for a year. Sit on it for a few months. Don't make any rash decisions about buying a new car or new house or anything else. Let's just let it sink in. Let this new reality of having money for a change, sit with you, and, include your wife and your husband or your life partner in this decision-making process, because it's going to affect them as well. And so in a lot of cases, you need to have that professional plan. And I would say in 99.9% of the cases, even if you are a financial advisor, let's say you're listening to this and you're a financial advisor, well, your emotions are going to be running high just like everybody else's. And so even though you have a deep understanding of financial markets and, how to budget your money, it's probably wise for you to have a team that you can go to as well. And so, you're talking about a CPA, financial advisor, maybe someone else, a colleague that you have very good relationship with, and someone to help you with your tax situation. So all of these people, and a lawyer. So all of these people will help frame your current situation, give you advice, but in the end, like we mentioned before, always make your own decision, because in the end, it's your responsibility how that money is spent and how it's invested. So a very important thing here is to be able to educate yourself, because you can ask questions and you can get advice from your financial advisors. But if you're not educating yourself on all of the available options that you might have, you may not know the correct questions to ask. You may not know what to look for when it comes to financial advisors in your team. And so in education is absolutely the key to sound money management for sure. Now, I'm going to do a little plug for myself, because I have a course that teaches you how to educate yourself about wealth management. Not only how to manage it, but also how to build it. And that's at strongmarket.com if anybody is interested. But education, no matter where you get it from, make sure that you have somebody that is accountable. So you have an accountability partner. So even if you have your team, you need one other person in your life that maybe is not a professional that can hold you accountable for the decisions you make. And you need to make that plan before you actually do become wealthy. So when you do become wealthy, this person can come to you and say, hey, this is what we agreed to. This is what you said you were going to do. And I'm going to hold you accountable to that plan.
Thank you. Wise words. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. So, folks, that pretty much wraps it up for episode 2. Cryptopolis and I would like to thank you for joining us for today's episode entitled Goals. We're going to come back with episode 3 and do a much deeper dive into goals, examining strategies and processes for a much wider range of investors. So until next time, Pura Vida.
Bye, everybody.